Adam Shewish, the late hereditary Tai Hawas, the hereditary chief of the Tsushot, and I worked quite closely together for a number of years. The first story is a very, almost life-changing. I was working with him, his wife Margaret Shewish, and his aunt, Auntie Mabel Taylor. And I was telling him a story that I had read, that it was about a 100-year-old story being recorded. The recording had been 100 years ago. And it essentially told the story of a young man, his wife, and his brother, who were fishing in the Somas River. And they went up above the rapids that we now call Paper Mill Dam. And they fished, filled their canoe, and came back down to go back to the village. In the rapids, unfortunately, the fully laden canoe flipped. And the 3 adults and the baby were sucked under by the current. The 2 men came up downstream and started looking for the woman, the wife of the one man. She didn't come up, so they were running up and down the banks of the river trying to find her. Couldn't, so both her and the infant child that she was clutching to her, presumably, drowned. So they had to go back to the village and give the bad news. Meanwhile, the mother clutching the infant underwater had found an opening in the bank. She went into it and got above the water so she could breathe. The story is fairly long, and she goes along this tunnel for some time until she comes up, and the story suggests it's about a month before she comes up at the other end in a place called Shoemaker Bay in the Somas River Delta. And she sees out there in the bay her husband and brother-in-law fortuitously are there at Shoemaker Bay hunting for hair seal. Anyway, so she hails them, they go back to the village, great rejoicing. So I tell them the story because in it there's a bunch of place names that I want to get to know if those are accurate place names, then they would know and be able to tell me. So I finish the story and I say, so do you know that story? There's dead silence around the table. And I'm waiting and nothing is said. And I thought, oh, I've done something wrong, because this was very early in my work. I thought, I've done something wrong. I've said something, I've stepped where I shouldn't step. And maybe 5, 6, 7 seconds went by. And I don't know, but it seemed like 5 or 6 minutes. And I said again, so, do you know this story? But I'm sweating, you know. And finally, Margaret Shewish said, yes, we know that story. And again, quite a long pause. And I'm thinking, oh, I've done something wrong, because I'm very new in this. And then she said, yes, again, we know the story. And she turned to Auntie Mabel, who was older. She was probably in her late 70s at that point. And she said, Auntie Mabel is the daughter of the infant in the story. You know the stereotypical story about the hair going up in the back of your head? That's the one and only time in my life that actually happened to me. And I'm sure my mouth dropped. And at that moment, no matter how much work I had done, all those early stages of my career, I totally understood in this personal experience that in front of me there was this venerable lady, honored by her tribe group and other First Nations, that had her feet, you know, 1 foot in the past and 1 foot in the present, 1 foot in the oral tradition past, that some people might say mythological, but it's wrong. They are stories, they are events, and the present. And that's what so many people don't understand, unfortunately, government officials, as well as the lay public, that you don't have 2 entities, the past with First Nations and the present. It's a continuum. And it just so struck me that in front of me I had this precious lady that's encompassed both realities. And it was one of the most moving moments in my life.